this series of slides, we have two goals. The first is to define what e-commerce is, and the second is to discuss the growth and sales of e-commerce. Now let's define exactly what e-commerce is. It's the integration of three things. First of all, communication. Second, data management. And third, security. And the integration of all three allows organizations to exchange information about the sales of their goods or their services depending upon what they sell. So subsequent slides, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about information about all three of these. So let's start with communication in e-commerce. Basically what this does is to support the transfer of information to and from the buyer and the seller. Okay, let's give an example. Say we have you, who's the buyer, and what you want to do is you want to communicate with the seller. In this case, maybe it's Amazon. So first of all, you yourself may want to communicate with Amazon. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this, which we'll explain later. Also, though, Amazon may want to communicate back to you as the buyer, maybe information about goods, services, sales, things like that. Now, in order to do this back and forth communication, there's a couple of methods that we can use. The most popular method in e-commerce is email. And we've all been in a situation when we've emailed entities back and forth. So you may have a question for Amazon, you can email them, or maybe Amazon can email you monthly updates about sales and things like that. Second method is the old-fashioned telephone communication. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but lately on websites, there are some that don't have telephone numbers. They're actually not encouraging people to call their firm. They're basically saying, we want communication by email or some other electronic communication. So your firm, when you're putting together your e-commerce site, you're going to have to decide whether or not to include your telephone number or not on your site. Another method, it's a little bit new, it's not as popular, that is Skyping. And what you can do, your company, is perhaps set up Skype communications maybe between the hours of 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. that if a customer actually wants to get on, maybe ask questions, they can actually Skype your company. Not quite as popular, but it is coming up. Another method is instant messaging. And this is becoming a lot more popular. And it's very, very cheap for companies. And what they can do is set up their system so that you, as the buyer, can type in questions to a customer service rep on the other side. So becoming more popular. And finally, you can set up communication via social media, Facebook, Twitter, things like that. Now, let's talk about data management. And data management defines the exchange format of information. Think of things like, what are you going to keep in your database? Things like you would want to keep information about your products. For your products, how much do they cost? Customers obviously very interested in cost. Maybe availability, maybe different things like color, size, different things like that. So within your data management, you want to keep information about your products. Second thing that you want to do is keep information about your customers. So with customers, think of valuable information you're going to need. Obviously their name, their shipping address, email address, telephone number, perhaps things like credit card number, I'm not sure. It all depends on what you decide to keep. So within data management, there's different database management systems that you can use. A very popular one is Oracle, but there's many out there. For example, with e-commerce, a very popular one is MySQL. But if you're a small firm, you could also use something like Microsoft Access. It really doesn't matter what DBMS you use. More matters about how big your company is, how much data you have, and things like that. So let's now get into security, and that has a direct relation to data management. What you want to do with security is authenticate the source of information and guarantee its integrity and its privacy. Now, we've all heard situations about hackers breaking into systems, stealing credit card numbers, and things like that. Or we've heard situations where you might get an email and you go, is this really from the sender who's on the email address, or is this maybe from it's a phishing attack? So with security, there's a lot to know within the information or within the category of security. But basically what we want to do is prevent hackers from getting at your information. In fact, this is part of the law, is that you actually have to keep your system secure. We definitely don't want anybody here ending up in prison. The growth of e-commerce, huge out there. The contribution of the web to the US or UK economy was about 8.3% in 2010, and it's going to rise even further by 2016. And online shopping accounted for around half of the UK internet economy as a whole in 2010. And possibly it's going to make up about a quarter of all UK retail over the next 4 years. And 66% of UK adults purchased online in 2011. So what does that mean? There's a lot of money to be made in e-commerce. So it's going to be definitely valuable not only for big firms, but small and medium firms to get involved in e-commerce and have an e-commerce site. The EU online retail market share between 2008 and 2012. This is a slide showing the information. And as you can see on this slide, the UK accounts for the majority of the EU online retail market share, about 12%. Now, right behind that is Germany, France, Denmark, Norway, and Switzerland. All relatively same, between 9 and 12%. Further down, you have Italy, Poland, and Spain, which aren't very big markets, but that doesn't mean they shouldn't be ignored, because all these markets are growing. But just keep this in mind, that if you are doing business with the EU, that the UK, Germany, and France, in other words, most of Western Europe, it's a much bigger market. And with regards to the US online sales, as you can see on this slide, there was a little, very small dip in the actual sales when the economy was really bad during the global recession of 2008-2009. But since then, it's really starting to rise again. And it's estimated that in the US by 2015, there's going to be $279 billion in sales for online commerce. So between Europe and the US, and we haven't even touched Asia, a lot of sales out there. So that's going to be very, very important for you in your careers in order to get your hand around global electronic commerce.